Hey, fourth grade, welcome back. Today we will be learning Module 6, Lesson 3. We're going to be learning how to represent numbers with place value disks, a number line, and using expanded form equations. So let's get started. Our first example today, we're going to be grouping tenths to make mixed numbers. So if you look at this first set of tenths, you'll see that these tenths are represented in decimal form. This is important to note because decimal form and fraction form, we're going to say them both the same way. Remember, these are tenths, even though it doesn't look like a fraction today. All right, so first, if we look at this, we want to ask ourselves the question, how many groups of 1/10 is going to make a whole? Well, we know that a whole is 10 tenths, so we could count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that means I would want to group these 10 tenths to make one whole. Okay, same thing right here. We have another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tenths, which we know is going to be another whole. And then this last little guy that's left over is just 1/10, so he's not gonna change. So we can view this as an addition problem now, where we have grouped and simplified all of our tenths to end up with the final solution of 2 wholes and 1/10. Okay, we could also write this in fraction form by showing it as 2 wholes and 1/10 as 1/10. Okay, the main thing you need to remember and review today when we look at these is that we know 10 tenths is equal to 1 whole. So when we're grouping our tenths, we need 10 of them to make that 1 whole. Okay, so if you look at this next one, it's already kind of divided up to make it pretty simple. We see a group of 10 here and a group of 10 here, which tells me that together I have 2 wholes. Over here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tenths. So that means all together that would look like 0.7. I can put these guys together real quick. And my final answer is 2 7 tenths. I'll write it as a decimal first. And then we'll just keep practicing writing it both ways. And then I'll write it as a fraction, 7 tenths. Okay, so when I think about this, I can think about my wholes as 10 times 1/10 is how I get to that 1 whole. Sorry, you guys, my pen's freezing up on me. There we go. 10 times 1/10 is 1 whole. So basically, we're creating a mixed number by grouping our small pieces into wholes. We did this with fractions a while back. The only difference now is we're seeing it in decimal form. All right, so let's move on to our second example. So in example 2, we're actually going to be writing equations for our mixed numbers using expanded form. So what that means is, if I look at number 1, I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 place value disks here. Each one's value is 10. Okay, there's no decimal point in this, so I know that I'm working with whole number 10. So I would represent this with an equation by breaking it down and saying 4 groups, or 4 times 10. Okay, when I do that, my answer is going to be 40. Okay, now we're going to expand this a little further and look at our ones place. So as we grow here, you'll see that our tens have not changed, so we would still represent this. I'm going to put it in parentheses now because we have more than one part. I'm going to show that as 4 times 10. Okay, my next place value disks here to the right, they're not tens, they're ones. So that means each piece is just 1. So to show this, I would want to put a parentheses and show that I have 2 groups, or 2 times 1. Okay, because these are both parts of the same number or the same whole, we're going to want to throw an addition symbol in between these two to show that we are actually going to be adding them up. So when we simplify this, we found above that 4 times 10 is actually 40. And we would say that 2 times 1 is 2. So our equation changes when we solve it out to 40 plus 2, which is 42. As you know, some of you can skip this step and do it in your head, but do pay attention and make sure that you are multiplying both pieces in parentheses first before you add them together, okay? All right, building one more time. Here we go. We have our 4 tens again, which is going to be parentheses 4 times 10, or 4 groups of 10. Remember that multiplication symbol can be spoken out loud as groups of. So that's why I'm saying it both ways as I go. All right, next, same set of ones here. We have 2 groups of 1. And then you'll see that we have a new place value disk, and its value is 1/10. So if you look at these guys, they are all 1/10, 1/10, 1/10. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these. So that means I have 6 groups of 1/10. So I would write that as 6 times 1/10. Okay, just like on that last one, we are going to make sure that we are adding all of the parts of our equation up, and then we will see what it turns into. So we know that 4 times 10 is going to come over and become 40. 2 times 1 here is going to come over and become 2. And then 6 times 1/10 is going to give me 6/10, which I'm going to represent in decimal form, 0.6. So when all is said and done, I'm going to add these guys up. I have 40 plus 2 is 42. And then I have my decimal point, and I have 6/10 to the right of it. And that's going to be my final answer here. Okay, so what we're going to call this that we just did, these equations are going to be called decimal expanded form. So decimal, sorry you guys, writing the letters is a little tough still. Decimal expanded, I'm going to abbreviate this EXP, expanded form. Okay. The other expanded form you will see today, or you will have the option of solving with today, would be fraction expanded form. Okay, so that's where you are going to see, let me pick a new color, see the decimal part right here, where you see the 0.1, the 10th. You would just see that written as 1/10, 1/10. That's the only difference here. That the tenths, and tomorrow when we get to the hundredths, you would see it written as a fraction rather than as a decimal. That's the only difference. Everything else is going to be the same. Your whole numbers in your tens place and your ones place won't change because they're whole numbers, so it doesn't affect them. Just something to remember. All right. Example number 3. Remember, if I go too fast through these, feel free to rewind and look back at problems, and feel free to message me questions if something I say does not make sense. It's a little different as I am talking and teaching a computer instead of you guys, so I'm still getting used to it. But do definitely leave me feedback when you see something that I could work on. Kind words only, please. All right, so example 3. We have a template to go with this one that I have inserted below. So there's a lot of different parts, so stay with me and I'm going to try to keep this neat for us. So first, let's look at this number line across the top. I want us to label it 0 through 5. So I'd have 0, 1 whole, 2 holes, 3 holes, 4 holes, and we'll end with 5. Okay, so this number line is going to help guide us as we zoom in for these next couple problems to show where our mixed numbers will fall on the number line. All right, so first one, we are working with 4 1/10. So when Miss Martin looks at this chart, the easiest thing, in her opinion, is to go ahead and write the mixed number, because I hear 4 1/10 and I automatically know that it looks like a 4 in the ones place and 1/10 as a fraction here. Okay, we've been practicing for the past 2 days rewriting these as decimals, so that should be quite quick and simple for you as well. We still have a 4 in the ones place, but instead of that 1/10 fraction, I'm going to have my decimal point and my 1 to the right of it. Okay, we know that these are equivalent. Don't forget that. So on my number line, when I think about this, I'm seeing 4 as my whole number. So on my number line, I'm going to be starting at 4, and I'm going to just be moving 1/10 over. So it's going to live right here. So if I were to zoom in on that number line, it would, 4 1/10 would be between the whole numbers 4 and 5. And if I broke down all 10 of my little pieces, I would find it really close to my 4 because it's just one little tenth away. Okay, if I'm writing this in expanded form, you might start with your 4 times 1 whole, right? Because if we were thinking about those place value discs, that would be a place value disc that looked like this, just a 1 in the middle. And then we'd have plus. We can do this with fraction or decimal form. Ms. Martin's going to use decimal form just because it's a little easier for her to write. Plus 1 times, 1/10. Okay, so that would be my expanded form version. You could write equals your final answer here if you have the space for it, of course. Okay, now looking at this, my next question is how much more is needed to get to the next 1 whole? So I'm between 4 and 5. So if I come back up to my top number line, I would see that I could jump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more tenths. So that means I am 9/10 away from the next whole. Which makes sense because if I took my 4 1/10 and added 9/10, I would get to 5 wholes. All right, so our next one, we are going to do the same steps, different number. So next one, we have 3 10s, 2 1s, and 5 tenths. I'm going to start with my expanded form on this one because I have a lot of pieces here. So I know if I have 3 10s, that's going to be shown as 3 times 10. And then plus, 2 1s, which is going to be 2 times 1, plus tenths. I have 5 tenths. I'm going to do 5. This time I'll do the fraction version. Only difference is I'm writing it as 1/10 instead of 0.1. All right, so now when I look at this, this is going to help me figure out my mixed number in decimal form a little easier because I know that 3 times 10 is 30, and I know that 2 times 1 is 2. So that tells me that my whole number is going to be 32. And then we just found that our fraction would be 5 tenths, which would look like 5/10 for your fraction form. Okay, just like above, super simple to change this to decimal form. Our whole number does not change, and our decimal is 5 tenths. Decimal point, then you're 5. All right, so 32. 32 is not on our number line up top, so let's think about this. If I have 32 and 5 tenths, I'm going to have to fall between 32 and the next whole number is 33. So that means I would zoom in on that number line between 32 and 33. Okay. You also can see that we have 5/10 here. 5 is half of 10, so I know that I'm going to end up right in the middle here with my 32 and 5/10, right in the middle. That also helps me figure out how much more is needed to get to the next one, because if 5 is halfway, that means I'm 5 away from the next whole. So I would write that as 5/10 away. So this is basically just taking everything we've done the last 3 days, decimal form, fraction form, expanded form that we just practiced up top, and popping them on a number line, and putting it all together in a chart so you can practice doing all of your new skills at the same time. All right, we've got 2 more. Next one is 4/10 or 4/10s, 7/10. That's something else you want to pay attention to. If I have 4/10s, that means I really have 40, because that would look like 4 times 10 over here in expanded form. Okay, it doesn't say anything about us having any ones here, so that means I'm just going to have a 0 in my ones place. Okay, and then what was my tenths number on this one? 7/10. So that's going to be, oops, we're on the fractions. 7 over 10 for our fraction. Oops, my 0 went crazy there. And it would look like 7 times, we'll do 1/10 for our expanded form. Okay, decimal form, just change that 7 over 10 into your decimal point 7/10. Number line, I'm going to fall between the number I have, 40, and the next whole number, which just count up by 1, 41. Okay. 7/10 is going to be, so if this is our middle point, it's going to be a little bit closer to our next whole. I'm going to mark it right here. You'll notice our number lines can be an estimate, especially with tenths. We can figure out where they are with our background knowledge of benchmarks. All right, so I need to count up to my next whole number. So if I'm at 7, I could count up 8/10, 9/10, 10/10, which would give me 3/10 away from my next whole. All right, last problem for today is 9/10 and 9/10. 9/10 and 9/10. So that's 9 times 10 and 9 times a tenth. So I think it works a little better if I do my parentheses last. Keeps me a little neater. Pay attention to this. We have the word tens, T-E-N-S, and that's our whole number, 10, or our tens place on the place value chart. And then we have tenths, which would be our decimal, the very first decimal to the right of your decimal point, tenths, which is going to look like 0.1. So the only difference here is this TH, so pay attention to that so you don't get your place values mixed up with these problems, okay? All right, back to D. We have 9 times 10, which is 90. And we have 9 times 1/10, which is 9/10. Okay, same thing here, decimal point, 90 stays the same, 9/10 becomes a decimal point 9, and then number line it. We're going to be between the number we have, 90. Oops, I'm a little too close to my little tools down here. The number we have, 90, and the next number, whole number, is 91. Okay, I'm at 90 and 9/10, which means I'm really close to that next whole. I'm just 1/10 away. All right, team, you will notice when you go to your classwork today that I have attached 2 different classworks. They're actually the same. Here's the difference. The first one you're going to see is going to be just your regular PDF that you can download and print, or you can download and use a writing tool on your screen to solve like you just watched me do. The second one is interactive, where if you open it, it will open in PowerPoint, I believe, and it has boxes where you can type your answers in. So those of you that are really not digging the pen on the screen and you don't have computer or printer access, you can type your answers in on that tomorrow. I would love to do that for everything we're doing this week, but a lot of our stuff coming up involves shading in, and that's not something you can type into a box. So anytime you have 2 classworks, they're actually the same problems. They're just formatted different based on who needs what. So when I can do that, I will. If I can't, I'm so sorry. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about these videos or these problems you're doing, leave me a message on the comments page at the front. And I hope you are all having a wonderful work from home week. I will see you tomorrow.